Hello everyone, and welcome to the webinar Diversifying Diversity. It's our pleasure to be here with all of you today. Of course, it's a new format. While of course we can see the panelists, and we know that there are over 50 people on this call, but it is virtual. We are in unusual times, and this is the first of a series of webinars that we will be doing with Xoxoday. So the first dialogue that we are bringing is to really look at, the times, the challenge of these times, the constraints. What are some of the new emerging facets? And I have a fairly, sort of an experienced set of panelists from across industry, and we are extremely excited to, go down this journey as a conversation with them. So before we start, just around the context of the conversation. We had a little survey that we sent out, and I'd like all of you, if you've received an email, to respond to the survey. If you're able to get adequate responses as part of this conversation, we'll actually show the results. If we don't have adequate responses, we will release the results post the webinar. So just a quick request, in case you have access to the survey, do take it. This webinar is being hosted along with my colleague Aparna George, and of course in partnership with Xoxoday. Yeah, Aparna, can we just have the slide on? Yeah.
I am unable to share it. I've just messaged Priya. She has to enable screen share.
Okay.
Yeah. Priya, if you can hear this.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Yes.
Okay, the other protocol being that there are two icons, Q&A and a chat. As we go through the session, please use the Q&A window for asking questions. It's going to be very difficult to toggle between both chat and the Q&A feature. So we request you to keep posting your questions in the Q&A using the Q&A widget. And towards the end of the dialogue, we have ample time that we're going to give for answering any of the other unique questions that have not been answered already. Yeah. Okay. So, the topic of the day, which is uncovering the emerging facets of diversity and understanding new coping mechanisms. And we've been sort of promoting this through an iceberg, and I think iceberg is very well known as part of the the D&I framework. But today, if we really sort of see that the whole difference between a man or a woman, or age groups, life circumstances, life contexts have all come together. Everybody is in a very unique sort of a situation. And we were just talking before this that, when we always spoke about work-life balance, one had control over work because everybody is part of the same organization, and life was left to everybody else to navigate. But today we are in a situation where everybody is working from home, and a lot of this will continue for a while now until things navigate with the coronavirus, and maybe blended workforces are here to stay. So keeping that context and the fact that so many different lives and multitudinal contexts have sort of entered the workplace, what are the various emerging biases or the emerging dilemmas, the emerging considerations that are coming for organizations when they have to keep maintaining and sustaining an inclusive work environment? And within that, what are different organizations doing? So, and we have, an exciting set of speakers, and I'd like Aparna to, introduce all of them as we build the conversation.
Okay, well, thank you, Puja, and welcome to all of the panelists, and welcome to all of you who are attending. I hope this is a fruitful discussion. We're looking forward to it. I'm sure it's going to be exciting. We really have a very interesting and distinguished panel with us today. So let me do a quick round of introductions. And as I introduce you, just do wave, for everyone so that everyone knows who you are. I'll start with Atma, Atma Godara of Oyo. Atma is a passionate HR professional with a wide range of experience across geographies and industries, ranging from startups to conglomerates. Atma has been recognized as HR 40 under 40 leader by Jombe in 2019 and is an official member of SHRM Blog Squad. Atma is volunteering with Niti Aayog as a mentor of change and is a regular speaker at educational institutions and various global conferences. His current role is the digital HR transformation and change management lead for Oyo. Thank you, Atma, for joining us today. Thank you. Let me move on to Vishakha. Vishakha Dutta from Publicis Sapient, India. Vishakha heads the inclusion and diversity function at Publicis Sapient. She has worked in the I&D space for more than 12 years and is also a strong ally and manages large support groups for women, mothers, single parents, and LGBTQI folks on social media. Thank you, Vishakha. Yeah. Veena joins us from Collins Aerospace. So Veena is a talent and diversity leader with a demonstrated history of working in the aviation and aerospace industry. She is a strong human resource professional with a degree from XLRI Jamshedpur, focused on human resources management and personal administration. Veena is an avid traveler and a wildlife enthusiast. In her free time, she likes to read. She was until recently the head of talent, diversity, and learning at Collins Aerospace and has recently transitioned to her current role as a business partner for the engineering division. Thank you, Veena, for joining us. Okay, let's move on to Debashish Ghosh of Berkadia. Debashish is a senior HR professional with over 18 years of experience in leading multiple roles in HR. In his current role, he works as the VP and India HR head of Berkadia, which is a financial services organization. Debashish, we look forward to hearing your insights during the course of this discussion. And last and certainly not the least, we have Taruna Lohmror from Xoxoday. Taruna, thank you for joining us. She is a seasoned HR professional with approximately 19 years of experience in various verticals of HR. During the course of her career, she has been associated with small, mid, and large-size organizations, majorly in the IT-ITIS domain. Taruna is currently the head of HR for Xoxoday. Thank you again. So thanks again, once again, to all the panelists. We hope you have an interesting conversation, and we look forward to hearing your insights. Puja.
Yeah, thank you, Aparna. Okay, looking forward to the next hour and a half, and I'd like to get the elephant out of the room. We are in with a pandemic, which has sort of surrounded us and defined our lives over the last 2 to 3 months. And I always say that the changes that have happened over less than 100 days would have taken maybe decades to have transformed our lives individually, professionally, societally. And it just took 100 days of a pandemic to really reset and reboot ourselves. So, keeping that in mind, before we get into really looking at what is D&I, we'd like to first understand from how all of you is, how have you, coped with this? How has the transition been for your organizations? How did as role holders, how did you respond to this? And, again, this is in no sort of order, but let's sort of begin with you, Debashish, and then we'll go, whoever wants to take it up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Puja. I think, we're all learning. I wish I had all the answers. I don't think at this point anyone has it, frankly. We have seen pandemics before, we have seen economic downturns before, but both coming together, I think this is unprecedented. A lot of times we blame leadership and whatnot, but really we don't have any reference point in the past and you can benchmark ourselves against. So with that context, when we started from where we are right now, Puja, I think we are very happy with the way we made some progresses. In my organization, very clearly, there's one goal that we had when we started this journey, right? The goal was that how can we make everything that we do as business as usual, right? So one, there is a people side and there's obviously the customer side, because we are in a financial services organization. From an HR perspective, how do we hire, how do we train, how do we engage, even how do we exit people as well? So everything had to be rethought and redrawn right in the drawing board. Uh, that was quite a challenge, because like many organizations when my organization was designed to do things in a face-to-face manner, right? We never went virtual in all these things. We never thought it was required. We never thought it'd be more effective to do that. So we have managed to do a lot of it. Thankfully, I think in a lot of sense, it is business as usual, which is we are hiring, we are training, uh, we are doing a lot of things on engagement. We can talk about it at a later point of time. Same time, the learning has been, I think, a lot on L&D side, where I can do the training for new hires, a lot of technical trainings. But how do you do leadership trainings, for example, with a lot of behavioral, a lot of collaboration, a lot of experiential learning that is involved. To be honest, that has it has come to a screeching halt at this point of time. But I think we'll figure that out in some time.
Sure.
But all in all, in short, if I look back, do I want to be where I am today? Absolutely, yes. I think we have made very, very steady progress.
Sure.
Can I be better?
Yeah,
Yes.
business as usual, we hear you loud. So you have sort of made a seamless transition, and that's great to hear. Veena? I know Veena's got a tough industry. So I thought, like, let me contrast it.
Yeah, I think outside of travel and hospitality, that's hit the hardest. Aerospace, as you know, 96%, I think, of flights are grounded across the world. The only ones which are flying are possibly mandated by governments and repatriating their folks back to different nations. But having said that, I think I'm in the initial times, and like Debashish said, it's but natural to feel like, hey, this will go away, this will pass. We were a very conventional organization, like you said, 100 days ago. And I think we've come pretty far in that journey. So we have two arms. We have the engineering side and the digital technologies, which is the IT organization. And we have the conventional manufacturing setup as well. So I think our manufacturing setup, where we supply different aircraft parts, came to a screeching halt when the lockdown started. And after that, to really start from there, to get to a place where you have an exemption for the industry, and then creating everything from scratch, right? Figuring out social distancing norms. How will you continue to operate? 50% people, 33% folks on the floor. Temperature checks when you're coming in, self-assessment forms. I think this is just the new norm from a manufacturing standpoint. On the engineering side, you and I spoke some time back. I think we had our work from home policy, which got launched a couple of years back. But a large part of that was restricted by the number of people who had laptops. So 60% of our organization was enabled to work from home at the beginning of this lockdown period. And slowly and steadily, we found, ways and means to figure out enablement for 100% of our folks in these last 100 days. So I think, which is I think, unprecedented. We have an organization which has always traditionally operated. We've had people who are very tenured, but I'm very glad to say that I think all of them have embraced this new normal. And while it hasn't been an easy ride, I think everybody's still figuring out what's the best way to make it work. And one of the most pleasant surprises, I think, for most managers is that our productivity has actually gone up. Thanks to Bangalore traffic not playing spoil sport anymore, I think most people are finding a couple of hours extra in the day to really spend time working. So yeah, I think it's terrible, the pandemic, and what it's doing to our world. And we don't have an end in sight, but I think what the learnings have been, along a very, very steep learning curve. So that's good news as well.
That's great to hear. Yes, and I think pandemic versus the Bangalore traffic. It's like choosing between devil and the deep sea, you know. Yeah. So, Atma, if again, you represent the hospitality industry, and that's the other one which has been a huge hit, like aviation. The knowledge industries, of course, it's been a lot more seamless, and the way you measure productivity, and you can work from anywhere. Of course, you can choose to work in office and for a long time.
Sure,
We
sure. Yeah.
are,
Okay. Sure, Puja. Thank you. Okay, so I want everyone to think of a situation. Think of yourself as or say on-demand video service or a photo sharing app, and you have a clientele which doesn't have an internet access, right? So that's what the current situation for us. I mean, hospitality is as a sector, it is badly hit, and within hospitality, I mean, uh, the way we have been gone ahead in last 1 year, I mean, we have been in 80 countries. We have acquired most of the entities across the globe. We have invested so much. For one of the example, I mean, there's something called Belvilla, Oyo Vacation Homes in Europe. We have invested $450 million in that entity last year, and it has 80,000 holiday homes. So, I mean, for last 1.5 years, so much have been invested. We went ahead with so many countries, and probably this, and and in the month of January, we did a restructuring and we consolidated across all the countries what operations we had. Now probably, we are waiting for the perfect time, say in June or July, to, reap on the benefits that how do we look ahead towards a revenue generating model, and, if we eases out on say funding and, cash burning and whatever you want to call it. So, well, and suddenly we see COVID-19. So I mean, the situation couldn't have been more interesting for Oyo, to be very honest here. Across the countries, I mean, the revenue have been sharply declined, I would say. And we have been, like, employee have been gone on furloughs, employee have gone on leave with limited benefits across the globe, unprecedented challenges for Oyo at these times, I would say. But having said that, now when, we can talk a lot about things which we have been hearing, yes, people are working from home, people are, putting lots of efforts. Three things I will highlight here. First, I think people are trying to make most of these times. So we have our, say, BD managers. What they are doing at this point of time, they are contacting the property owners and they're telling these things that, hey, in this pandemic we are together. I mean, you have tied up with Oyo, you are not getting customers, we are not able to provide you any customers, nobody's traveling, we are in this together, we will come out of it. Second thing, because of China has controlled COVID-19 pretty much. In China, already we have 70% of the properties are open now, and remaining properties will be open in next few days. China, we are recovering back. UK, again, we have started recovering to some extent because the properties are opening. So from the business point of view, yes, I can say we have to wait and watch. If it comes to India, when do we have the lockdown opening, and if do people travel, do we have vaccine in place? So that way, the industry will change altogether. Yes, we have one of the businesses, this Oil Life. It's a rental PC business that is in place, and it is running. That one vertical is there. I think one of the things which it will force us to think in future, that how do you diversify the business? I mean, being in one business has its own set of challenges, I would say. And of course, these things are there, and people are working from home. People are overworking from home. Rather, I would say the fatigue. What uh, I think Vishakha has mentioned in the beginning about fatigueness also. These things are there, of course. I mean, everybody's talking about these things, so I will not cover these pieces. But yeah, let's we are waiting and watching kind of a game, which is what we are playing here.
Sure. So it's blended. I mean, of course, between aviation and hospitality, these are, going to be tough times.
Yes. Only when Veena let people fly, we will have the hotels open for them.
It will take some time for it to become business as usual.
Sure.
From your perspective, from Sapient, yes. Would you like to share with us how, how did you transition? And I do remember, you saying that even before the lockdown, steps had started being taken. So if you can sort of share that story. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot has been spoken already. I think Sapient in terms of ensuring people were safe, etc. Our work from home had started before the national announcements, and quite a lot of other things had started. I also remember on our initial calls, our leadership calls or internal employee calls, people were asking this question on how are we doing things differently. I think we just made everything go faster was our answer. For me, I was in the middle of driving an entire month full of inclusion and diversity activities and challenges, and it was the first time we had experimented on a month-long program. And this happened, in our organization in the first week. I remember 3rd March is when I got the first message saying that we'll have to cancel our IWD program, International Women's Day program, on the 4th of March. And we went, we canceled, we had 3 sessions planned. We canceled the first session, and within 2 days, we went live with a webinar on the second one, and we never stopped. Everything was quickly made online, but not just, a lot of programs just don't happen online as easily and as as well engaged, right? So we had to really become creative, and I think I'm very, very proud. I have newfound respect for my colleagues. I think an organization like ours with presence and with international movement continuously. In fact, I was jokingly telling somebody, I like this time because I'm able to get time on people's calendar because people are not traveling, because in our case, people are traveling so frequently. So it is also the organization's responsibility to get people back homes, ensure they are safe, get people from bigger cities back to their hometowns if they need to, etc. So a few of my colleagues were extremely stressed, but then I think the achievements were glorious. Like I said, there were just too many things that had happened. The last piece that also stayed very, very closely with my mind, and 2 things I shared just before, when we had just connected back, right? One was the communications, right? I think we had so much of communication, and the whole notion of being uncertain about what is going to happen, that went away because we were having communication so frequently. So the leadership was meeting the core team was meeting every day, maybe multiple times in the day. But the larger audience was engaged on a weekly basis by, the top leaders. And we were talking about, every question people had on their minds. Our CEO, address would happen very, very frequently. I think that kept us together. Apart from, how we then started listening a lot more on what's happening on the grounds, and we kind of, a lot of our measures just evolved through this listening. Puja, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Puja.
Sorry for that. Taruna, thank you, Vishakha. Taruna, the last but not the least, from a Xoxoday perspective, very young workforce, startup environment. How has the change been, for you and for the organization? How did you deal with this?
Right. Thanks everybody firstly for having me here. It's my pleasure to join this esteemed panel of speakers. Thanks for all the participants to be a part of this webinar, and we are hopeful that we'll be able to contribute to your learning today and also learn something from you guys. So from the Xoxoday standpoint, I think one of the good things for us was that the team is pretty concise, consolidated in one of the places, which is mainly in Bangalore, and then we had movable sales force around different places within the geography. And our entire population is on laptops from the connectivity standpoint. So that made us absolutely mobile. We were pretty much on top of the news that was coming in and pretty much prepared to do a first BCP run to ensure that we have smooth operations to ensure that, there's a continuity of work from our end. So for us to make people go back, work from home and start working immediately was not a hassle at all. Majority of 40% of my organization is a tech team, and already their connectivities, their VPN connections, everything was in place from the infrastructure standpoint. So for everybody to get connected and start working was just plug and play for us. It really didn't make much of a difference. What actually was important for us is the well-being of the employees. And also to see that people who are staying back, are they adequately stocked? Are they able to manage their things? to ensure that there is a virtual connectivity. They have somebody with whom they can speak, they can talk. Let them not do something out of anxiety just because they are not having anybody to talk and land up doing anything which is berserk. So for us, it was more important to ensure that the well-being is taken care of and they are safe wherever they are, or they have reached their respective destinations wherever they wanted to travel before, or might as well just stay back if the lockdown has already started. So we had initiated a BCP a week or so before the actual Janta curfew happened and the lockdown started, which kind of gave a hint to a lot of people, and there was a lot of flexibility shown by us if anybody wanted to start working from home. For that matter, we had some 2-3 fun days in office. Anybody coming and sneezing in front of us was asked to go back home and start working. So a lot of us actually, made fun, and they were like, oh, I didn't tell you, but I came from XYZ place. Can I go home? So that kind of a fun actually started at a workplace, and we were able to positively manage that transition.
Psychologically, sorry, I just sort of stop you there because so that we can move the dialogue, and I think we'll explore this a little more. Yeah. But yes, it's a young, playful environment, and I've been also hearing, and living in Bangalore, we always suffer from allergies. Personally, I think 20 days out of 30 days, my nose is perpetually blocked, and I'm sneezing, and now I'm so scared myself because there's also stigma now associated with cold and cough and sneezing. We've heard all 5 contexts, and what we now wanted to hear was from the people. So I'd sort of like to request Aparna if we can run a quick poll right now and actually hear from others how they are feeling, how has the times impacted them. We'll include their feelings as well in this conversation. Yes. Aparna, you're mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Priya, could you run the first poll? So essentially for all participants, we'd like you to respond to this query. Right? We've heard from the panelists, we've heard how organizations have reacted, how some have, it's been a smooth transition, for some it's not been so smooth. Everybody's sort of watching and waiting. We'd like to hear from you now. How has it been for you, for employees in your organizations? Right? How have they sort of responded? How have they dealt with the change? And I'm sure it's a canvas, you'll have majority feeling, different people feeling differently. But if you can look at the majority of employees in your organization and then respond to this query very quickly, we'll then move forward from there. So just a minute quickly to respond. We just want responses to the first poll.
Someone in the group is saying that the submit button
yes,
is not working.
It worked for me.
Priya, do you want to check that? It worked for you? Okay.
Yeah, it's working.
You need to scroll down.
Priya, the submit button only works if they respond to both the polls, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So there are 2 polls over here for all participants. We had wanted it to come a little later in the discussion, but that's fine. So if you could just respond to both the polls right now and submit your response. Okay. Priya, once you've seen that enough participants responded, you could just let us know.
Okay.
All right. Priya, could you share the poll results?
Sure. So now I'm adding the poll. Yeah.
Okay.
So can you see?
Are you sharing your screen?
No,
One second.
yeah, this is, yeah, it's come up.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Interesting.
It's interesting. As you can see, 34% of respondents believe that most employees are anxious, and I think that's understandable in these circumstances. Overwhelmed, and there are quite a few who are comfortable as well, so which is also heartening to see, right? So just a very quick sort of emotional checkpoint here. And we'll keep this in mind as we talk through how employees are responding, how various groups, various talent segments are reacting, and the challenges that they're facing in the course of the rest of the conversation. So thank you everyone for responding to the poll.
Okay, so let's, keeping all these feelings in mind, and I think it's, as Aparna mentioned, very understandable. What we like to sort of explore is different talent segments within the, within the organizational fabric. How have they been coping with this? A majority of organizations that we have represented, will have, a larger segment of the millennials. So I'd like to address that before we move to the other groups. So we have, the millennial population, with Xoxoday, with Berkadia, with Oyo, having a young workforce. Vishakha, even you have a bottom of the pyramid with the young workforce. Veena from the IT. What have you sort of seen in the way they have been able to adapt to this? Are you seeing any generational differences between how they have adapted and the ones who've been senior? So first, let's really go with the the millennials. What are some of the areas there? Any dilemmas, or has it been all very seamless? Debashish, do you want to comment?
Sure. I have majority of millennials working for us, about 70% of them. And not surprisingly, I would say that they actually took this lockdown, at least initially, like fish to water. Like they are the ones who are known for the tech savviness, right? So they are the ones who are actually driving force behind all the latest technological and digital innovations that you see around us. So when you talk about AI, machine learning, anything that can help them make productive and make efficient, they adapt to it very, very fast. The same thing happened with us as well. So the moment we said that, well, initially getting technology was tough because we never had a work from home policy. But when we got the technology, they were the fastest to adapt to it. And they adapted most willingly compared to my other workforce of different generations. So that was obviously a big plus for us to have a millennial population. The second thing that worked for us, having millennials, is that millennials we have seen, are very, very self-driven. They are very, very results-oriented. And they want to maintain their control over how they work and when they work, right? I think they're not known for being very respectful for traditional authority and hierarchy and structures. In a work from home situation, they got that autonomy and independence to do things their way, right? All we needed for us was to provide them the leadership and the guidance and let them figure things out on their own, right? So rather than giving them a long list of like a daily tasks and asserting our position and give orders, we just gave them a goal to meet. And if I look at the last 5 months, last 5 weeks, we are actually back to where we started. We're at the same productivity levels that we had when we started. So these two things really worked for me. One being the technological savviness that they have, and secondly, the fact that they can manage work themselves, and actually they prefer it that way.
Okay, so technology, the ability to adapt to technology very fast, and of course, them being, netizens, So that was one. And the second is to be able to work with a lot of empowerment and not to be monitored. So any other competencies that has worked for the millennials? Anybody else wants to add on to any other observations that you have that has actually worked for this talent segment as an opportunity?
So I think this situation has tested maturity, seasoning, personal resilience for everyone, right? At the same time, I think I've seen a slight difference in how people are feeling if they are with families. So if they're stuck in this situation with families, and if they're stuck in a situation, isolated, and if they're in the cities and the families are back home, and if in case they actually stay alone, then that situation is actually even more tough. In the last part, if you're alone and you do, even if you know how to cook, etc., I think the existential issues has really, really affected them, right? The other part is I think this is a very jovial, fast tracked, happening, group, and for them to talk about how they're feeling and not feeling very good, being isolated can also be very lonely. That has not worked too well. I have heard a lot of these sleep cycles completely getting reversed. I think that has happened to a lot of us, but especially with people who don't like routine and who are, the strength is their flexibility, right? I think that has not worked too well for that generation. What has worked, what I have been very happy about is how obviously resilience takes over after some time, right? So I've seen people really get very creative and especially spend their time doing hobbies. Like, in the most recent time, you would see them composing music and, posting, completely different things. So that has really, that's been happening.
Yeah, so I think, and that's great. Some very good points, Vishakha, that you brought in. If we sort of really look at the millennials, a lot of them today would have migrated to Bangalore as a city. They're not living with their families. Especially in the industry that the technology industry. They would be either living alone or in PG. And while technology is a great enabler, there's also the sense of isolation. There's a sense of not being part of a community and not being part of a camaraderie. I don't know, Taruna, do you have that sense as well from the kind of workforce that you manage? In the office, you did mention they are playful, they're young, they like cracking jokes, and there's a sociable side to things which is now missing if you are going to be working from home. So any comments around that? Have you sensed that?
Yeah, and I do agree with Vishakha to a very great extent, primarily because most of the organizations with the younger workforce has moved away from a typical hierarchy-based working to a more collaborative style of working, which primarily required all of us to get together, jam around, and do a lot of things and figure out a solution, or that could be working on a product as well. And considering that ours is a younger organization and we have a lot of 96% of my population is millennial, and for them, one of the attraction was to come to office and interact and spend time, the way they want to. It is no longer restricted to those coffee, breaks that you and me used to think about in our younger days. It's more to do with the way they would like to talk about. And the discussions necessarily was not only about talking about the social aspect, but also about maybe a product piece which is under development right now and talking about a problem right now in their own way, and learning. So that collaboration piece is missed, which was also a way of them to learn and grow and have fun and share each other's idea. So I think social aspect definitely is missed. Also, what is important is, from my standpoint, I'm personally concerned about their safety also. Considering that in between when the lockdown had started, there was a lot of information about PGs being vacated by the landlords, and the tenants were asked to go back home. So in those cases where the modes of commuting was not available, and I was worried about their safety and well-being, to some extent, I was also welcoming them and saying, if you want to come over, please come over to my place and let's make some arrangement. But that's another piece. And staying all by themselves and nobody there in the PG, I landed up checking with them in their physical security. Do you have CCTV cameras? Do you have a proper log? Are you completely stocked? So these kind of stress anyways continues to be there with us. But also I think for them, the virtual connectivity over a long time is not working out. They definitely miss that social piece of jamming. Yeah.
Sure. So let's bring in, when we look at the generational piece, and we have a workforce in their late 40s, 50s, and Veena, if I sort of, draw you into the conversation, there is a fairly experienced and tenured workforce in, in Collins. When you sort of look at, the adaptability of millennials versus how have the older generations adapted, or are there challenges and things that are coming up there which need to be addressed?
Yeah, so first let me correct you and say we're not that old. Okay, I think we have a fair bit of our millennial population as well. But having said that, you're right, we have a lot of tenured folks, and I think two things. One that Vishakha brought up, which is really in terms of resilience, right? So I'm going to just give you a couple of quick stories, anecdotes of what happened. So especially when the PG eviction happened, right? A lot of them reached out to us saying, what do we do? Because, we're not even getting alternate arrangements to stay here. So a lot of them actually went back to their hometowns, to their families. And we said, you know what, go, we'll figure this out. And, we'll figure out how to connect to work. But you want to feel safe, go be with your parents. And I think a large part of those people who stayed back, they stayed back because they got excellent support systems here, either from their, and interestingly from their colleagues and from their managers at work, who are checking in on them almost every day saying, hey, how are you doing? Is there anything that you need? I know it's complete lockdown, but what can I do to make you feel more comfortable here? So I think that those emotional support systems were very, very important for these millennials. But having said that, on the other side, folks who are very tenured, I think in the beginning, like I said, all of us struggled in the sense that you're struggling not going to office, you have like this schedule that you have calls that you have to do to the US, and then suddenly, everything's happening from home. But I think experience helps in these cases. Also, given the Indian context, many of these folks have families. So there is this emotional support system that exists, and plus I think in general resilience is a little higher as you grow a little older. So this group, while they kind of struggled in the beginning to get used to the idea of working from home, they're actually they've taken to it pretty well. I think there are a lot of these there are a lot of these maybe inherent biases even I may have that the older you get, it's harder to essentially adapt. But when push comes to shove and you're kind of put in that situation, I feel like most of our managers, if not all, and most of our leaders, if not all, have actually taken to it pretty well. So yeah, interesting stories, very, antithetic to what we had thought before.
Yeah, sure. So I just and this is sort of an open-ended question, as we tie this generational segment, as the older generations, and here I'm not talking about the Gen Z, in their 20s or early 30s, when you are having family and you are at home, right? You are married, you have young kids, you could be a single parent, you could be living with, your dependent parents, you could have your children, and right now we're also impacted with this whole educational system where I have colleagues who have to give their laptops to their kids because they need the kids need to do Zoom based classes. So sort of looking at all of these multidimensional sort of challenges which have entered, any comments from the group here based on the kind of stories that you're hearing from your workforce?
So I can take that. So I think the stories have obviously been poured in, right? And remember, all of these people not only have parenting responsibility and single parents, dealing with it all alone. In fact, just when the conversation started, I got a message from one of the single parents group I support, from this person who says, now I have to go back to work full time and I have to take my child, and can one of you come and stay in my place? I have enough place. And then some other people offered to for her to come and stay, and she says my home and my office is very close by, so it doesn't work for me to do some of this. So while some of these things will happen, there is this whole thing of, being confined with the children. And I also have to say that there is a demarcation of experiences if your child is below 10 years or if they're above 10 years, because of, how the children then maintain themselves and the kind of attention and the dependency they have on parents and, people around, right? So that I've seen a lot of difference in people's experiences there. But it is also a stage where people have elderly people, most likely. If you're staying with them, one good thing is that you're able to see them and, take care of them. If you're not staying with your parents or your parents-in-law, then there is a lot of concern, and especially, it's been about 2 months and more. People get sick. You can't get help for them. I actually have a friend whose mother is terminally in, and there's been a huge dilemma of can we take them to the hospital or not. So I think these are the kind of stories we've heard. Then, if you are well networked and you continuously you utilize social media well, then you're able to get doctors, etc., to speak to them. In our office, I remember, I think one of the latest conversation has also been about how the organization can support people to get extra laptops or stuff for online classes for the children. One observation that I had was has been interesting, which is to see that men and women express themselves slightly differently, right? So the kind of reactions and the conversations women would have on a call, and depending on how what is the audience of the call, the frustration. I've heard things like, okay, now the school work is also now my work because the school has given it to me to get the homework and the classwork and everything done, right? I, of course, heard a very funny story of parents who have twin kids, and they went to the school in an enterprising way and said, get the kids in 2 different classes. So now both the parents have taken off during the school time, some 2 hours, I think. And the 2 parents are sitting in different rooms with the 2 twin children, to get them to do these classes. At the same time, when the men are expressing this on calls, they're more like, okay, now this is just getting too much. But the whole expression on their face and how they're managing it, or, they're seeming to manage it, looks very different online, right? Now you're not able to interact with it. And it's been, you will read a lot of material to see that, is this going to affect your judgment on how people are working or not?
So are you seeing a blurring of gender roles? I mean, are you sort of, and I'm sort of throwing it out there with, both the spouses sort of being out there and working together. We've always been spoken so much with gender as gendered roles, right? Who's going to be taking care of the kids, who's going to be taking care of education, etc. Now that people are all together in the same context, are you seeing a blur of gender roles, or are you still sort of experiencing, that the woman is getting more stretched? So what is, I mean, we've heard of a lot of interesting stories, and I think, Veena, you mentioned a couple as well when we were talking. So if we can sort of share stories, that what is it that you're seeing? Are you seeing an equal participation of gender at home in terms of handling domestic chores, or are you still seeing a divide there?
Yeah, so I don't think this is really, just limited to organizations, right? I mean, I keep hearing of all these stories where men who haven't, participated in domestic chores properly because they've, completely had a different role to play at home, are now suddenly sweeping and mopping, and it's like a new experience, this really novel experience for them. And now it's gotten old because, you've been doing it for 2 months. I think it's really a great start in terms of blurring of gender roles. I think it's great that men are taking on, I would say, more of the domestic roles that women have been traditionally holding on to. But I think the true test is when we go back to normalcy, right? So when you start having maids coming home, when you start having help coming home, are we still, are men going to still think of, hey, that's not just a woman's job, that's something that I can do to help as well? I think that's an important question, which we don't know the answer to just yet. And while I'm speaking about men, I think also women. I have a couple of friends who took a break from work And during this time, they started actually thinking of, hey, can I start this? Can I start doing this? Can I make money out of this? I'm really great at designing stuff online. So it's both ways, but I'd really like to kind of wait and watch, see if these, get into a more sustainable, equality in terms of gender roles and gender, basically work at home and at in offices between men and women. I'm still, I'm just waiting for it to all pan out. Let's see.
So
We talk about
I recently heard of a story of a man that he was sitting with his young baby on the lap while doing an official call, and it was very acceptable. And that's what sort of has provoked us to really look at that. While we are hearing instances a lot more about domestic abuse, and I think that's a thin line that is, sort of coming in as another factor to this. How much of it is, as part of your organizations, how much of that is something that you all are getting ready for, looking at addressing this, if this becomes a reality and it comes out on the fore, or is it still under the carpet? So this is again a very open question, and then we can sort of really go into what kind of, initiatives, practices, etc. But let's sort of lay the fabric of things which are not being spoken about too much, but it's out there, and things that may need to be addressed if they become a reality.
So I'll just say that yes, we are seeing men participate, or we are visibly seeing men participate, and you're able to actually visualize people, you're able to get a view into their homes, right? So people's children are into the video cams. I remember a colleague of mine on an early morning call, her daughter not only just sat with us on the call, she also drew me on the laptop. So I think those are very, nice things that will stay with some of us. At the same time, I would like to point out that I think this situation has also made us more of who we are, right? We've been left to ourselves, sent for ourselves. We've gone back, introspected. We've started doing more of what we like, and that's one thing that is also going to get aggravated. Not every man is going to suddenly come out and pitch in and do what is required. So we actually ran some programs only for women, just to get a sense of, apart from all the other mental health work. So while we talk about what are the different practices, we did hear things like, when somebody helps me at home, it's as if they're doing me a favor. I get the feeling they're doing me a favor. And if you're locked in with your, parents-in-law or anybody else, even some people's parents may not be supportive, any family member or roommate who is not supportive, obviously abusive relationship, the whole package that comes with the addiction withdrawal that we are seeing, in terms of a high number of cases. And it is not happening outside our organization, right? We can't be ostriches and think that this is not happening in my organization.
Sure.
People who stay at home come to work. So we've heard of situations that people are in distress. We needed to give them space to talk, and that helped. I think addressing vulnerable groups, and hearing their own stories have worked. So I will say that people who intended to blend gender roles, I think they've gone ahead and found the time to do that. People who never did this, I think they cannot suddenly just wake up one day and do this, and it does get very, very stressful for women, for people who are fending for themselves, who are on the receiving end of abuse or bad relationships, or just non-conducive work environment, home environments, who have their suffering is probably being elevated.
Sure. Okay. So I think I ask Aparna to show the results of the second poll, and check with Priya, and then we can really talk about what else is, as organizations, what kind of initiatives that you're taking for managers. Priya, if you could show the results of the second poll.
I think you'll have to sort of scroll down. All right. So the question was really to look at, how has the transition been for managers to create a more inclusive workspace? And it's really heartening to see that more than 50% are saying that managers are making a more conscious effort. So that's really great. So I think it's, as all of you have mentioned, right? So it's made people a lot more aware, a lot more, having to step back a bit, perhaps be more inclusive because we're all working from home. You have your family around you in your home, home space, and that can't be ignored. So we've got a little more human in that sense, and I guess that's also resulted in managers making this a lot more of a conscious effort. So that's also great to see. We've spoken about a few sort of vulnerable groups. We've spoken about different generations, how are they reacting, how are the challenges that they're facing. We've spoken about gender, the fact that now maybe to some extent roles are getting blurred, but maybe not will that sustain in cases where they've already started getting blurred, and in many where they haven't as yet, and there could be other more serious issues to be dealt with. And I'm sure you're also finding other vulnerable groups emerging, whether it is from your LGBTQI population, whether it's people with disabilities, or whether people from different sort of circumstances and family situations. And I think this is a dialogue that we can keep open and keep sort of reflecting on as we go forward. To shift gears a bit, if you can look at now, your different talent groups, and how are you really looking at managers really? So this is actually something that has come up from all our discussions, and the role that's being played by managers. So that was why we had the poll question as well, to look at the role that managers need to be playing now from an inclusion perspective. It's really getting a lot more enhanced. For an employee, manager has always been important, but now the manager is almost like a stand-in for the organization, that if your worldview has become a little smaller in that sense, your team, your manager is really crucial. And that interaction and the connection with the organization, the bridge is really through your manager. So the question really to the rest of the group, and we can start with Debashish over here, is how are managers coping with this larger expectation? As an organization, what are some of the steps that you might be taking to support and enhance manager capability to sort of operate in this context?
Yeah, I think, Puja, the role of the managers has never been so important ever in organizations, right? I was talking about how the millennials could be managed, and I spoke about how they want to be given autonomy, given the freedom, given the empowerment. If as a manager, I'm not okay with that, then I have a challenge. So that is our biggest realization. Although I might say that almost all of our managers have quickly adapted to the situation. But overall, when you spoke about competencies, I think there are a couple of things that are to design in all our training programs going forward. I think there are two I can think about right away, and we are doing a lot about those two things. One is emotional intelligence. I think never has been a time when it is more important than this, right? And EI really starts with self-management and self-control. Whenever there is a crisis that hits, there is no time for a manager to be frantic and disorganized. So without self-control, it's very easy for the manager to fall prey to the grip of panic and then be at the mercy of the feelings. So having the right intelligence, emotional intelligence, is very, very important for the managers. That's one very, very important thing. Secondly, being creativity. When any crisis strikes, it is time for the manager to really think of the box and move to plan B, right? A manager who is a creative thinker, who can embrace this challenge and utilize the unique talents of those people around them, are the ones who can develop a very, very quick solution. They are the ones who can get different perspectives and use their knowledge to get creative solutions to the problems. So if you ask me, these are, to me, the most important competencies that managers will need to handle a crisis situation: emotional intelligence and creativity. And that is what our focus as an organization has been.
Okay, so that's interesting to hear. That's really interesting. Atma, would you have any other perspectives on this from a manager perspective? What are managers, how are they reacting, and what are the competencies, that they would need now and into the future? Atma, we can't hear you. Are you on mute?
Yeah, I we can't hear you for some reason.
Am I?
Yes.
Yes.
I think there was okay, great. So what I was saying that in OYO we put managers into kind of samples. We could do that. So my first set of managers, they are they know how to. We have a very flat hierarchy. I would say these managers, they are very friendly with the team. They actually communicate, rather over communicate with the team. They discuss things. They sort of have daily meetings. They understand things. In fact, the team members, they come to me and then, hey, I know the name of the dog of my manager also. They know who are the kids. I mean, they are very well gelled up and they are doing really, really great, I would say. And then we have a second set of managers. I mean, these people, I mean, they are exceptionally good, but the thing is, they don't know how to, interact with the team, how to interact remotely, or, they have this hesitation where, how do we include the family members or, other people who are in the, in the conversation. So when I talk about the first set of example, I have a colleague, and whenever, so they are a couple, they have two children, and whenever we have this call, we always have her son, making faces on the camera. So if there is a call with her, and if the son is not around, we started missing him. Hey, where is he? I mean, he has become part of our daily calls and conversations. And if you talk about the second set of managers, what I was talking about, HRBPs, they receive these emails and phones and messages that, hey, I haven't spoken to my manager in last 10 days. So that's a very worrying factor, right? These people, they have been working with the managers, they're receiving all the emails, Slack messages and everything, but they are not able to receive any sort of communication. And, people are technically, and I would say people are overworking from home, right? Schedules have been disrupted. They are not able to, because people now you do not have domestic help. In most of the cases, you have to cook food, right? And I mean, when people in office, they used to get the entire 1 hour to go and eat lunch. Now you need at least 2 hours to cook and everything. So in that case, I think what we have taken certain initiatives where the HRBPs and the L&D team, they're trying to address the unconscious biases of the managers, that hey, these are the things which you are not dealing, and probably if you go and reach out to the employees, that's a good thing, right? So they have provided these tips in terms of Slack messages, in terms of emails, that hey, these are the 5 things. Why don't you have at least once a week informal catch up with the team without any work, and please make sure the videos are mandatory, because in most of the calls, these are the audio calls and people keep the videos shut. That is the first thing. Second thing, what we have done, and I think this would help us in the long run also, is understanding, I mean, connecting in a different way altogether. When I say different way, it is, I mean, so informal catch up is one thing. Second thing is, of course, work catch up. The third, which I'm talking about, a different setup here, like connecting people on their hobbies. So now the managers have started knowing about the people. Hey, this is a guy who loves, or this is a girl who loves a lot to travel. But in the current situation, that is not happening. This is the person in my team who is a foodie and cooking food a lots of time. So I think this is the third angle of knowing the teams, and it is very interesting to know, because man is a social animal, or rather I would say person is a social animal, being the gender neutral here. People are connecting more in these virtual times. This is what I've seen, and I think this is what we have been doing.
Okay, so interesting to hear that yes, could be managers who are more comfortable, who take to this like a duck to water. There are some who need a little bit of hand holding, and as in a HR role, what you are doing is actually doing a little bit of that hand holding, guiding them in terms of how do you engage in this virtual environment, right? Simple steps to connect beyond work and to the individual and their interests, right? So that's interesting. Okay. I can just throw it open now to anybody else if you have any thoughts on this. Managers, especially, the kind of challenges they're facing, and as an organization, what are some of the steps that you might be doing? Taruna, Veena, Vishakha, I leave it to you.
Yeah, and at this stage, we can also take audience questions. So if you have any specific questions for a particular organization based on what you've heard in terms of their context and the various talent groups, feel free to ask the question, and you can either direct it to a speaker or you can ask anyone.
Thanks, Puja. So thanks, Aparna. It's a nice question. I think managers anyways were quite empowered when it comes to Xoxoday, and the teams are very closely knit, considering that they have been spending a lot of time, and that being a product company, that's one of the key features in the organization where the teams are really close knit and they tend to work together a lot. I think what has happened right now is the bandwidth of the managers is stretched out completely. There are a lot of new calls that is happening, the amount of time you're spending in prepping each other or giving instructions regarding to work, because everybody has to do a certain segment of work. I think that's kind of taking their bandwidth. So what is happening is, while there's a lot of focus which is paid on the employees, I think there's a lot of appreciation that also has to go to the managers. There's also a possibility that in midst of trying to manage everything that has to be a BAU, we tend to probably miss maintaining a frequency of appreciating or thanking people. Now, these are very small nuances that, wherein the HR can step in and help the managers. So for example, in our organization, when we had run a well-being survey for the employees, we found out that for a span of 7 to 10 days, while the managers were connecting and checking on the well-being, there was no appreciation shared consistently across the organization. So we facilitated that and we had an open house where we collected the appreciation and citations from all the managers and read it out to the employees, letting them know that while it was not done, but people are still thinking about you and it means a lot to us. The second way where HR can be available is that we also saw in the polls that people are very, very anxious right now. There are a lot of these human related questions or the behavioral related aspects that can come out, which probably managers are not trained or equipped to manage at their end. So it is important that whenever any such situation comes up, which is a little sensitive, that could be anxiety regarding my job security or what's happening, what's the next course of action, or I'm all alone, or some other stress in the family, it is important that we are available, or there is some online counseling assistance available for the managers. Now, the only way we can support the managers is ensuring that they have all the arms and ammunitions to manage their people. In terms of their connect, in terms of work allocation, in terms of daily huddle is something which is anyways a part of their work schedule and it's been happening. But I think equipping them with these tools and ammunitions is something which is going to ensure that they are able to do fantastic job throughout in a consistent way.
Okay. Again, interesting. Yes, making sure that they have the right tools available with them to face and manage their population, and the stress of over communication, the need to do that now, right, is definitely there, right? Everything's on call, it's on video call, so there is a lot of stress and expectation from managers as well. Okay. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on this before we move on?
I will just.
There are some questions coming in, so if we can also look at those questions. So someone's asked that, will work from home, Petri Subramanian, will work from home become the new normal? 70% at work from home and 30% at office. Jyotsna has also asked a question, so would request you to respond. Anybody can respond.
So I was going to address some bit of things that I think helped at our workplace. So I think the first thing was to listen in. So going with the first question here, will 70% of working from home will become a norm? Now, nothing should become a norm unless it actually works for a lot of people. So I actually heard a lot of reaction to the TCS announcement of 75% of working from home. I think every organization is obviously going to look at the benefits of it. It will bring down costs. It will be beneficial for people. It will make everything very flexible. But it may not be the solution for everyone, right? And that may not be a job description thing. It may be the way, the space at home. And when I say space, it just doesn't mean real estate, right? It means space. Is that work environment conducive for you wherever you are at your home? There are people who actually have benefits of going to office. We discussed some of the existential issues. So I think one of the first things we did, and which I thought it was bold, was to continue with the employee survey that we had planned earlier, and we didn't stop it. It gave us opportunity to hear more on the ground. We did some bit of mental health work initially, and we continue to do that. We spoke a lot about our EAP. We did mental health workshops only for vulnerable groups, right? Only groups of women, etc., just to create that safe place where people are able to talk about certain challenges that works for that cohort, right? Mindfulness programs that kept running on. I think when we were talking about the people managers maturity, people managers efforts, we realized that the emotional maturity of people is just very, very important. We you will get questions on how do I file my expenses, how do I do XYZ, etc., etc. Along with that, leaves, right? What happens to your leave balance? Now you're anyways at home, are you going to take the leave or not? First one was to check on people who had taken more than 5 days of leave. So I heard that the HR team actually spoke to every one of them. The people managers, we had to coach people to have conversation. Now people have conversation on work, and then there is also my orientation to have this 101 where I'm hearing about or encouraging people to talk about how they're really feeling. Again, the managers themselves are also stressed. It can be work, it can be just their own situation, right? So we've been working a lot on training programs, and there's like a regular calendar of training programs, and we're calling this build your remote tribe. So the whole way of how one holds a tribe together, influences, brings people together. It's a human connection. I think there's been a lot of training and conversation around it. We actually sent out notes to ask people to go on leave so that they are able to take time off to just manage themselves better, right? So I think that was, and not just once but quite a few times. The leadership rolled out and took out time to say that I will help volunteer and mentor people, anybody who wants to speak up. This is something you might, it might be interesting for you. We roll out a pilot on generational diversity, and we actually ask the leaders to pick up personal as well as work challenges to talk to people who are, fairly younger. And while this was a one-time pilot, I have basically heard from the leaders that they've got this engagement continued because they found it very beneficial, because there's a completely different set of thoughts and activities and refreshing ideas they're getting from others. So basically, these are the kind of things apart from the engagement activities that have gone.
Okay, so what we're hearing is a lot of focus on the emotional health. And of course, the data point of anxiousness, anxiety that we saw is on the front for. What we're hearing is that managers themselves have to be, while people have to be emotionally resilient, managers have to have a lot more empathy. And when you're connecting virtually, you need to be more human, because you're not seeing the person. And sometimes when you build distance, you can easily be left out. And a manager may just end up going to one or two people that he or she is more comfortable with, because you have this distance. So how do you reach out more? How do you connect more? How do you be a lot more caring? How do you be a lot more empathetic with all these roles blurring at home? And I'm sure a lot more stories will start coming out in the days to come. It's also a way of a gender sensitization, which is happening by itself because people are in the home front, but it's also putting a lot of stress on relationships, because people are not used to, when you have working spouses, I don't think people are used to seeing each other, and I hear a lot of that conversation that I haven't seen my spouse so much than what I've seen in the last 2 months that I could have probably seen, over 6 to 8 months, because we practically meet over the weekends. So there's a lot of behaviors that are, a lot of adjustments, a lot of newer ways of approaching both work and personal life. So there are some questions which I thought, if you'd like to respond to, whether work from home is going to become the new normal. I mean, is this something that we're going to be dealing with, a lot more? From where I come from and what I'm sort of hearing is that the transition back to workplaces is going to be very slow, a fortnight or so, but people are going to take many more months to really transition back. So that's what I'm sort of hearing. There's another question which has come out. What measurements are you using to measure the outcome of your engagement initiatives and that you're taking for your employees so that the experience is better and improving? The new age of managing employees' performance and productivity virtually. So, any responses to this?
So I'll take the first question, Puja. I think we have a morning call where the entire leadership kind of comes together, really figures out what are some of the burning issues. It could be as simple as we don't have enough laptops to, now we're speaking about repatriating some of our employees back to India. We're actually looking into every single person who's coming back, what kind of issues they're going to have, etc. But having said that, going forward, when we discuss, what's our entire return to work plan, it's actually phased out. We are looking at plans which are over a certain period of time, because right now everybody's unable to work from home. We don't want to take chances with people coming into work unless it's part of their nature of scope of work, etc. They have to be in office. We're figuring out how to enable them as well. But the new normal is going to be at least for our organization, which has been very traditional, embracing the new gig economy, the gig workforce. Going forward, we are going to have to rethink our workforce model and look at how do we get the new, the millennials to essentially be attracted to our industry, which has, which in the past we've gotten lucky, or we've been successful to some extent, but we'd like to do a lot more. I think that there's a huge mind shift that needs to happen in terms of workforce planning. The other thing also is in terms of real estate, right? We're seeing a lot more discussions of, hey, if 100% of my workforce is not going to be at work every single day, do we really want to, invest so much of our capital in real estate? Manufacturing arm is completely different, and that there is a requirement there. But for the engineering folks, for those who are in digital technology in the IT space, do we really need them to essentially come into work every single day? Or can we actually plan a mechanism where we figure out who are the teams who need to come together, work together, see each other, have a discussion, maybe do it over a phased manner, a couple of weeks, a month, etc. So I think a lot of new ideas, a lot of things I think will not go back to the way they were in the past. At least for us, a new normal is definitely something that's not been explored before for us.
Sure. So, any, I'm just sort of harking back to what Siddharth has asked, and I don't know how, things are getting measured now. Since this question has come, we'd like to address it. Of course, that there is an imperative in all your roles to keep maintaining an inclusive work environment, despite the fact that people are remote, and there's a need to constantly, get them emotionally connected and feel respected and valued, in different ways. So is there any measurements or anything, or is it too early to speak about this? Please respond, to this particular question that was asked.
Puja, I'll take this up, and to answer to Siddharth's question, I'll give an example of our organization. Now, Xoxoday has one of our product is known as Impulse, which is a platform that allows for employee engagement, rewards, and recognition. It allows for a lot of collaboration and for teams to come together, and it, the user interface is in such a way that there's a lot of comments that can be posted, and people, participating in those activities and all. So from the fun piece of it, when we do any such event, all of that is virtually happening on our own product called Impulse. Wherein, for example, that could be a photography competition, that could be when we had Yugadi, getting the kids at home to do painting and put it up there. So what is happening is we are looking at the number of employees logging into the platform, commenting on those activities, participating in that, and looking at the stats for it. We also do, in between, keep asking the employees in terms of what kind of activities they would be interested in, that they feel is good, and we can get them to participate. Also, we have a post-event survey that we are planning of rolling out every time we conduct an event, to see what has been the response, how well it was received, what is it that we can improve. So that is one way to look at on the fun piece of it. When it comes to looking at their performances, I think all the organizations have taken a little backseat on just looking at the number of hours, but looking at the productivity in terms of what has been allocated and what's been given out. There's a certain level of tolerance that we all have developed during this time to allow for that benefit of doubt going to the employee, that because of maybe the internet connectivity or certain commitment at home, there is a possibility that some tasks may get a little delayed. So if you ask me, the whole concept of having a so-called KRA driven work is now become a OKR driven work, where you have objective and key results based work, wherein you have a certain objective and you have a team which is coming together to work on that single objective, and you are looking at the performance or the delivery in terms of everybody finishing their task. So there's a certain level of tolerance that has come in terms of maybe a little bit of time or maybe a little bit of X and Y involvement in those kind of things. These are two major things in terms of the employee life cycle that's been changing. In terms of onboarding, everything has gone digital. The induction has become digital. Onboarding experience has become completely digital. The forms have been digitized to ensure that there is a smooth onboarding which is happening. So there are multiple of these phases. Sticking to what Siddharth had asked, in terms of fun initiatives, I think it is important to also know what the people want, and not do it just because everybody else is doing it, it will be good for you. So if you first roll out a survey to check on what are some of the things that they're looking forward for, I think your response will be great. In terms of measuring performance and productivity, I think OKR is a response to it, where you can have an objective and the key results defining that your objective is achieved, as against just looking at a traditional way of having the KRs.
Sure.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. I think so as we wrap this up, I think what we're getting is, of course, there's been a huge sort of transition. There's been anxiety. People have been overwhelmed. There's also a sense of coming together. And also it's important to hear a lot more about how your employees are feeling and understanding their various circumstances. Diversity now really is not just in terms of metrics or in terms of the traditional ways just about 3 months back, but it's becoming very sensitive to people's different circumstances. I think what I'm sort of hearing about vulnerable groups, and I heard this terminology multiple times. I think we have to even look at people who are single. They may be young, they could be a vulnerable group. A single parent could be a vulnerable group. A person with elderly parents could be a vulnerable group, right? People with young kids, and challenged with getting them educated and continuing with their education could be a vulnerable group. So how are we most being sensitive to these vulnerable groups, while of course with this entire work from home being pretty much sort of a norm for many more months that we come. And there's going to be pressure on managers that, do I recognize this? Do I stay connected? How do I stay engaged? And do I recognize that the people that I work with come from these different circumstances? So that's where we end today. It's a very complex subject. And I think we've been also, as role holders, you've been dealing with a lot, because to make this transition itself as a business is a huge huge thing. I come from a time and space where even getting work from home sort of, even sort of spoken as a way of life. Just 3 months back, it was just a concept. And yes, there were organizations which had done it, but they were few and far between. But there were always constraints of roles, of providing that flexibility, people being very judgmental of people who actually left early from home or actually work from home. And today, the fact that this has become something which is being accepted. It's going to come with its different set of challenges, but I'm sure it's going to have its own set of opportunities. So thank you very much, for the conversation and dialogue and participating with us today. We are all learning. For all of us practitioners, though we've been in this field for a while, I think we are all learning because of the new sort of data points and the new circumstances and the new way of doing things. So, we will, for those of you who've sort of responded to the survey or have not responded, please do so that we could share some of the results back and continue this conversation, because this is not a point in time conversation. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot in the months as we go forward. So thank you very much. Thank you. So I am leaving the audience. If there's any one last question the group can take, but if there are no more questions, then we'll wrap up the discussion right now. Okay, so thank you very much, and a pleasure talking to you, and looking forward to staying connected.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. It was great being with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Priya?
Yes, Aparna.
Yeah, hi, Priya. Priya, I was just wondering, you have access to the poll data?
Yes.
Okay, could you just share that with me?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for your support.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.